Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship II. We're in London. I'm Marshall Cycliffe, that's Paul Cheon, and we're in the booster draft portion of our day here, Paul, where we've got War of the Spark booster draft in the hands of our players. In the feature match here, we have a Yuuya Watanabe from Japan. And Yuuya, well, he drafted an extremely awesome deck here. 5 colors, all colors being touched here by Yuuya. On the other side, Olivier, we got to watch him also draft this morning, much more conservative as far as that goes. Just 2 colors, green-red, with a very straightforward game plan, basically around this card right here, Crunch Wrangler.
Yeah, green-red Crunch is what the archetype that Olivier chose to go with here. But we haven't seen the Enraged Crunch. You know, that's the important one here. But yeah, what Olivier's deck is looking to do is just, it's a very straightforward red-green beatdown deck, curve out, use some combat tricks, and win with some big creatures. But, you know, it seems like the overall power level of his deck seems kind of low. But again, his main source of victory here is to just curve out. And the fact that he wasn't able to play a 3-drop there is big. And I think, you know, Yuuya, sure, he's a 5-color deck, and it might be on the slower end of the spectrum, but he does have even good things early to block. Cards like the Leyline Prowler does a ton of work. 3-mana, 2/3 Death Touch Lifelink is very, very good. And on top of that, you even saw the Spellkeeper Weird, which is just a 3-mana, 1/4 creature, which also does a good job of blocking. But that Crunch Wrangler is huge.
It did. It picked up a counter from the Goblin Assault team. It also picked up a counter from the Goblin Assault team. 2 different ways to do so.
Right. So now we have a 4/3 Trampler on the battlefield. Does Yuuya have an answer to this Crunch Wrangler? And he does. It's the upside of playing all of the colors is you get to play the removal in all of the colors. And he is, in fact, splashing Divine Arrow. Oh, sorry. It looks like it was his turn, and he was just deciding what he wanted to do there.
Yeah, but he had multiple ways to deal with this Crunch Wrangler. He's going to take the most replaceable way, but in this case, it's not going to work out for him. He played the 3/3 from Relentless Advance there, and that did threaten to trade off, but as it stands, the big boy hits the table here, and any creature with power 4 or greater is going to trigger that Crunch Wrangler, not just crunches. And that's going to put that third +1/+1 counter on it. So Chain Whip Cyclops hitting the battlefield is actually pretty uncomfortable here for Yuuya.
Yeah, so Yuuya taking kind of a calculated risk there. He wanted to be very efficient with his mana there. So he wanted to play, you know, of course, like a 4-mana spell. And then on the following turn, follow that up with Divine Arrow plus Soul Diviner. Or sorry, Divine Arrow plus some other threat. But it looked like Olivier did have an additional 4-power creature, meaning that Yuuya was not able to get in a trade there with the Crunch Wrangler. So now he's sitting at 10 life.
Yeah, this is starting to get sketchy because if Yuya's plan does revolve around using Divine Arrow to kill the Crunch Wrangler, it's not going to work because Olivier has another 4-power creature with a Turret Ogre in his hand.
Right, and Yuuya is unable to currently play Divine Arrow plus Soul Diviner as he only has access to 1 blue or white mana. He did draw Mana Geode, which would allow him to play a Divine Arrow, but that would be it.
Yeah, the prospect of trying to line up a block plus a Divine Arrow doesn't look super promising here either, thanks to that Cyclops. So instead, he is going to play the 3-mana, or pay 4 3-mana, the Conjurant. What is that in Olivier's hand?
So it looks like he just took notes of some of the key tricks that Yuuya had in his deck. Often in Limited, the things that you really care about are the spells. So, you know, of course, players have
instant speed.
Yeah, right.
Right. Go ahead.
So it looks like that's what it was. It looks like those were notes.
Okay.
And you know, Olivier has to be, you know, some alarm bells are probably going off in his head. He's like, wait a second. You played a 3/3 Ugins Conjurant. I have a couple of 4/4s in play. Why do you have 2 mana up? What could they be? What could those tricks be? And you know, he certainly has to be aware that of Divine Arrow being potentially an option here. So Olivier does have a steady aim here, which will do a really good job of kind of fighting that Divine Arrow.
That's +1/+4 until end of turn?
Right.
Okay. And given that that's the case, In.
And Olivier choosing to use the activated ability on the Chain Whip Cyclops so that Yuuya cannot block with one of his creatures, meaning that Yuuya needs to have some kind of a trick here to be able to remove one of these creatures on the battlefield. But again, we know that there is the steady aim in Olivier's hand. Yeah, tough spot for Yuuya.
He is under a lot of pressure. Olivier Ruel finally able to do the Crunch Wrangler thing. And look at this. Steady aim doing its job. And this is going to force a chump block here from Yuuya Watanabe.
Right, and now Yuuya is down to 4 life.
Yeah, and remember that Chain Whip Cyclops can just be activated again next turn, so it's kind of what's the second creature that Yuuya can put out. If he had Enter the God Eternals, he could be in decent shape here. That was his second blue mana source off the top of the library, but he doesn't.
Yeah, so Yuuya does have a Spark Harvest in hand, which he probably needs to use to fire it off on the Chain Whip Cyclops, because that activated ability is huge right now, especially because Yuuya just doesn't have much of a board presence.
But he's looking at it and saying, well, then where does that leave me? Chump blocking and still taking damage?
Right, because, of course, the Crunch Wrangler is a 5/4 trampler.
Right. So not a great way to go here for Yuuya Watanabe. Really finds himself in a tough position. He's got Soul Diviner in his hand, as well as that Spark Harvest you mentioned and Mana Geode. He could, well, he could technically cast all 3 of them if he really wants.
I mean, I think his best shot is probably using the Spark Harvest on the Cyclops and then chump blocking, going to 1 and hoping to draw into the God Eternals. Alternatively, you can play Soul Diviner and sack a creature to Spark Harvest, but that's basically the same thing as just casting Spark Harvest.
Not a good position here for Yuuya Watanabe here in game number 1. This is round 2 of our booster draft. It's round 10 of the tournament. And these are our players coming out of that first pod. And, you know, the way that these pods are constructed are by your record. So this is the top players in the tournament currently. Yuuya Watanabe, Olivier Ruel, both with excellent day ones, looking to continue that trend today.
Yeah, and I think this ultimately Yuuya coming to the realization that this is just what I have to do. This is how I can potentially come back here. Put yourself in that position to come back, of course.
Yeah, so he can kill the Chain Whip Cyclops, then he can chump block, take 2 damage, go to 2, and then try to find an answer for the Crunch Wrangler and hope that Olivier has no combat tricks, burn spells, or more creatures.
Right.
And as it stands, the Turret
Ogre gets it done.
Would get the job done anyway. So that is going to be game number 1, going to Olivier Ruel from France. He finally was able to put together the Crunch plan,
right?
And it was even
it
on
got
camera.
There.
It really
Wow.
did. It looked quite strong there. Yuuya needed some interaction a little bit sooner than he had it, and Olivier was able to get the job done. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more live magic here from London. Don't go anywhere.
I'm with Mike Sigrist, and we're going to open this pack of War of the Spark, and I want to know what you're going to pick first.
Alrighty. Alright, so let's just do that around. Sorting through the commons right here. We'll look at the uncommons and rares here. Alright, so the rare we see is a Atomic Distinguished Advocate. This is a solid aggressive 2-drop, but the card I'm looking at here is Nahiri Storm of the Stone. It's a versatile removal spell. It's a planeswalker, so you know, they kind of have a snowbally effect. You can get 2 for 1 out of it by killing multiple creatures, or more than 2 for 1 even. But it's also a hybrid card, so you can cast it in a white deck or a red deck, so you can kind of go in any direction you want. Outside of that, 10th District Legionnaire is very strong in red-white. It's like a, you know, a heroic card from the past. And the rest of the commons are kind of mediocre. Gateway Plaza is actually a lot stronger in this set than it was in other sets, because the power level of this set is really high. So being able to play in Splash a bunch of different cards is at a premium. So I actually probably would take that 4th out of this pack. And I do like Tamayo's Epiphany. Maybe I would take that over Gateway Plaza, but this is a solid card draw spell, and the format can be quite grindy. So having a card that can draw you extra cards and also select is really good. So
All right, what's your final answer?
Oh, my final answer is Nahiri for sure. Nahiri Storm the Stone is definitely the best card in this pack.
All right, so red, white. Do you like those colors in the set?
Not particularly. Those are aggressive colors. I don't really like drafting aggressive decks in general. I like to draft grindy decks. So I would be looking more to draft like a blue-white or red-blue control deck when I take it, but red-white is fine too.
All right, Nahiri, there you have it. Pack one, pick one for Mike Sigrist.
And welcome back to the feature match area here in London. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. Thanks so much for coming along. And welcome back to the booth as well. We are checking out some results here. So let's take a look at what's going on in our feature match area besides the one that we've been watching. We do have, by the way, kind of a neat time walk situation. We weren't able to get to it last time because we were watching Yuuya Watanabe in that round. But it is kind of funny because we ended up with pod 2. So the top pod is made up of the top records, and then it just goes in order. So these are still some of the best records out in the field. They were all players from North America somehow. It was 7 Americans and Alexander Hayne from Canada. So we've got the kind of North America fight playing itself out there. So that's currently Brian Brown doing and Alexander Hayne meeting in this round. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see some of that. I'm not going to spoil, and I also don't happen to know what's going on with it. But we've also got Seth Manfield versus Jeff Cunningham. You know, we've got Olivier Ruel in the feature map. Now we got Jeff Cunningham down there as well. Just two kind of names from, I don't know, I guess just the previous generation of professional Magic players.
Right. These are kind of the players that were, much more well-known back when I started playing competitively. I would say, something about 10 years ago, I would say.
It wasn't 10 years ago, Paul. I'm sorry.
Was it more than 10 years ago? Oh, my goodness. I didn't want to give away.
10 years ago was when I started watching Magic.
13 to 15 years ago. Okay, 15 years ago. All right. Anyways, Jeff Cunningham was, widely considered to be one of the best writers. Wrote just really entertaining articles back in the day.
Yes.
While, of course, playing competitively as well. And then, of course, Olivier, one of just the best players at that time.
Jeff, particularly known, correct me if I'm wrong here, tournament reports?
Yes.
Was that kind of his thing?
Yeah, that was his thing. And, I know every time, like he went to a Grand Prix or whatever, I would always look forward to just being like, okay, when is the next Jeff Cunningham article going to come out? Because I know it's going to be a very, very entertaining read.
So what's going on here? I believe we saw quite a flurry there with Tyrant Scorn clearing the way, and I see Tibalt's now in the graveyard. Oh, is this Enter the God Eternal? Did they
sure
just
is.
give you one of these when you walk into the draft? What is going on?
I guess so. I mean, this is one of the best rares in the set. Seth reading all the modes, all powerful, of course.
Yeah.
Deal 4, gain 4, mill 4, and also get a 4/4. So doing a ton of work here. And it looks like Seth Manfield also on the Crunch plan here with a Crunch Wrangler going down. And Jeff, liking the spells in the graveyard so far. Tyrant Scorn, one of the better removal spells in the format, along with, of course, that Enter the God Eternals. And, I've actually run into Jeff a good amount in the Modern queues. He's been playing a lot. He's actually one of the trophy leaders on Magic Online in Modern, and he's been playing a lot of the Is It Phoenix deck.
Okay, well, it looks like our main table's ready. Why don't we jump back up there? Yuuya Watanabe and Olivier Ruel. Well, we'll keep an eye, and I will keep you updated as to Jeff and companies do. And also, one interesting note about Jeff, his brother, Jackson Cunningham, with the Pro Tour Finals. Remember that against Even Floch? So that was
the green-white aggressive deck.
Yeah, as it turned out. Okay, we're underway here in game number 2, though. We've got Yuuya Watanabe playing against Olivier Ruel. Olivier with that Crunch Wrangler opener, and there it is again. Now, remember, he's got 4. So it is not uncommon. In fact, it's quite common for him to have that on turn 2.
Yeah.
Paradise Druid on the other side of the battlefield, though, for Yuuya, a key piece of the puzzle and one that Olivier would love to answer if given the opportunity. The fact that it has hexproof at the moment, though, means even a burn spell won't be able to target it. And we already see, wow, there it is, 5 colors for Yuuya Watanabe already.
This is the ideal start. And look at this, using all the mana here with the Soul Diviner here as well. So Yuuya Watanabe now has access to 5 mana, a great blocker here in the Soul Diviner, and you know, he's got some very, very powerful spells in his deck.
First things first, though, let's attack my 2-1 into your 2-3 and see if you want to do it. Look at that look from him. Oh, no, he says, I didn't read my hand correctly.
Wait,
I don't think Yuya's falling for any of this nonsense. That is 2 damage. Yuuya says, thank you very much. I will take it. I love it, though, from Ruel. I love it. Vivian's Grizzlies, the follow-up, really not where he wants to be. Uh-oh. You know what he wants to see. You know what he wants to see. Show me that Niv Mizzet off the top of the library.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Getting a, you know.
He peeled it.
Here we go. The thing is, Yuya's hand is totally fine even without it.
What does he have?
It would be great if he played a turn 4 Niv Mizzet.
Let's see what he's got. Oh, yeah, not too bad at all.
Right.
Toll of the Invasion to kind of clear the way, and then an Eternal Skylord to affect the board directly. Niv Mizzet on turn 4, though, come on. That would have been absolutely absurd.
For sure.
I think I would have just super freaked out, Paul. I'm not going to lie. This booth might have melted around us had he done that. You know the weird part? I got the vibe that Olivier might have been rooting for him a little bit to do it, too.
You know, the thing is, as Magic players, when you've played for so long, you just appreciate when really cool things happen, even if it's at your expense.
Agreed.
Maybe not so much at the Mythic Championship level, but, you know, just even any game that you play, you're like, wow, that was really unlikely to happen, so I'm really glad that it did.
Also, good bad beat story.
Yeah.
Over.
Everybody
Guess
loves
what happened
I heard
to me?
everybody loves hearing those, too. So,
Oh, yeah.
You know,
just keep telling them,
Yeah,
Paul.
just don't stop.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have to do them anymore now, so.
Yeah, that's true.
You wouldn't believe what happened in playtesting the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, I got beat by a card, so I changed it.
That's kind of what we do.
Hey, by the way, Olivier finally has found what is probably the best card in his deck, Nissa Who Shakes the World. We have not seen that from him yet on camera. I believe he's a mana short. No, he does have a mountain in hand, so he can cast her. That's great.
Yeah, for sure. So probably running out a Turret Ogre here to maybe get in for some damage. Pump up that Crunch Wrangler, but I don't think he wants to. Okay, so he does want to attack. I think Yuuya is actually just fine trading off the
token.
Well, not the token. I think he might want to use the token as a way to draw cards off the Soul Diviner.
Good point, good point.
So he might want to just trade the Eternal Skylord for the Crunch Wrangler because we saw that card get out of hand in the previous game.
Yeah, especially with how that one went. Yuuya got behind, even though he had pretty good tools at his disposal and couldn't ever come back.
Yeah. And you know Yuuya is just looking for that Niv Mizzet. So.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And when
go ahead.
When you play against a red green deck too, I mean, you're not really concerned about evasion from your opponent's side, and you know if you're Yuuya, you're just going to get there in the late game.
So I think that Yuuya has decided to block here. He just wants to get all the information possible, so he's going to use his Soul Diviner first. You can tell he wants to take it.
Yeah.
And he did. So I like it from Yuuya. That shows some guts. Come on! Wait, it was a gold card.
Was that Niv Mizzet?
I don't know. No, that smile, even though he does look happy, says to me, no, that was not Niv Mizzet.
I would really appreciate the slow roll Niv Mizzet as well.
I would too. Slowly get your mana together.
Shake your head.
Yeah. But no, it was Raoul's Outburst. But first things first, he's going to try to clear the way here and see what's going on. And this is the turn before, so this actually worked out beautifully. Because this curve from Olivier was going to be really nice. This is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Into a powerful, rare Planeswalker, no less. But Yuuya has disrupted that by taking away Nissa.
And now knowing about these combat tricks is also huge. Yuuya can play around them to the best of his ability now.
Yeah. Samut Sprint and Steady Aim is the relevant cards left for Ruel.
Looks like a Spellkeeper Weird, maybe. So, got the defenses set up. Ooh, okay.
So Raging Crunch was the draw step there for Olivier.
And he does have the combat trick, so he can,
Yeah.
make some pretty good attacks here.
He's chose not to use Samut's Sprint to give the Raging Crunch haste.
Right. Preferring to use the combat tricks in hand to kind of save his creatures or maybe potentially get rid of multiple creatures.
Yeah, just would give Yuuya so many options if he did that.
Yeah. Now, Yuuya has perfect information
Yes.
because Olivier did play and draw Raging Crunch, so he knows that Olivier could either play Samut Sprint or Steady Aim this turn. Steady Aim, of course, is really difficult to kind of play around because that's a lot of additional toughness. We're talking about 7 toughness on either of these creatures. So if Yuuya does really want to get rid of one of these creatures, he needs to triple block.
Yeah, the tricky part from Yu's perspective is that he really does want to keep Soul Diviner and that token going because it just represents any amass. It just becomes cards. It's 2 cards as it stands.
Yeah,
And that does prevent a triple block here.
Yeah, Yuuya could try to maybe just block with the Eternal Skylord just to get Olivier to run out one of those combat tricks.
The mentality being just, I've got to work through these at some point.
Right.
I can't let them be this sort of threat that is over my head the whole time where I just keep taking damage.
Right. Yuuya could also go for a double block here with the Eternal Skylord with the Spellkeeper Weird on one of the 4/3s. This does force probably a combat trick out of Olivier, and Yuuya would only lose one of his creatures because Olivier does not have the ability to play both of his combat tricks. He only has 2 mana up, so the 4/3s would at best be either a 6/4 or a 5/7.
Yuuya is up against it here as well. Let's not forget that it was Olivier who won game number 1. And
But
boy, he's really tanking this one out. This is
Definitely. And, given that Yuuya knows about the combat tricks and us knowing that Yuuya is holding Raoul's Outburst, he kind of wants Olivier to run out a combat trick this turn. That way he can safely resolve the Raoul's Outburst and get one of those creatures on the battlefield.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sure that's what he's thinking about here as well. I think he's probably just come to the conclusion that it is time for him to trade off even some of the important creatures on the board. Also just from a much bigger picture perspective, theoretically, the longer the game goes, the better for Yuuya.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, he's got the more powerful cards. Right now, he has Raoul's Outburst, which is going to get him a 2-for-1. Then he can get it back again using that Spellkeeper Weird. If it's still on the battlefield, another 2-for-1. I mean, just that right there should be able to power him into the late game.
Right.
He looks like he may be lining up 2 separate double blocks. This is taking forever, though.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the judge hasn't said, I need you to make a play, which
Right,
is usually
right.
the
Yeah,
sentence.
sure, this is a big play. Yuuya has
Yeah.
perfect information, but this is...
Do you see that look from
this,
Olivier?
this is taking a while.
And you can see the judge says, I need you to increase the pace of play a little bit there. The onus is on the players, of course, under a 50-minute round clock to play at a pace commensurate with finishing an entire 3-game match in that time frame. And that's kind of the measure.
Right.
And, of course, you could easily imagine that if each combat step went that slowly, that it would never happen.
Right.
But there's also a little bit of leeway given for the fact that this is the inflection point for this game, right?
Right.
I mean, this is where this game is probably going to be won or lost. So he should be able to take a little bit of extra time for something like that.
Yeah, and now Olivier is choosing to save the Raging Crunch, and then now is just providing the option. He's like, look, I will trade my Turret Ogre for your Soul Diviner, but I can still put 1 damage on your token here. If you want to draw a card, you will lose your token. But this is actually pretty good for Yuuya. He will now be able to cast a Rouse Outburst and kill the Crunch Wrangler this turn.
Yeah, that's right. Interestingly, though, from Olivier's perspective, he did just take out 2 very powerful cards with that combat step.
Right.
And he was able to trade off, a creature and a trick there for some really powerful stuff.
Right, but Yuuya will now be able to just kind of slowly crawl further and further ahead in this game. Because keep in mind, he's going to use a Rouse Outburst to get one of the creatures off the battlefield, and then he's got that Spellkeeper Weird, which you can use to get back the Rouse Outburst, kill another threat, and then just continue to get ahead on cards. Heck, maybe he even casts a Rouse Outburst and, you know, no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't mill Enter the God Eternals because, of course, you can just you can just play it again.
Yes.
Oh,
so
actually,
he decided to play a Tidebearer Giant here.
yeah, so
That's going to get him a card. And further stabilize his board. I think he figures that the Tidebearer Giant is good enough to hide behind for now.
right.
It is a 4/5 sitting on the battlefield there. Now, Olivier still has Samut's Sprint in hand. And again, you mentioned it before, but Yuuya knows about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is slowly slipping away. Olivier
Yes.
needed to string together a couple of good spells here to continue putting pressure on Yuuya, but I think Yuuya is very close to stabilizing here. If anything, he might already be stabilized at this point.
Yeah, this is I agree. And look at that. That is the sign of stabilization, and that is when the game turns to Yuuya Watanabe. When Olivier Ruel says you may go with no attacks, that means that this board is stable and Yuuya is in fantastic shape here.
And look at that.
What did he find?
Soul Diviner #2.
Jeez. Really?
Yeah.
Boy, Olivier's going to freak out when he sees this.
It's like,
I mean,
how'd
he's
this
seen
happen?
the list, but it's
Yeah.
like, come on, man.
I mean, there's certainly better top decks in Yuya's deck.
That's true. This is
Right.
actually not the worst case scenario. We're going to see Vivian's Grizzly activated.
Oh, okay.
And he found a Pollen by Druid. Okay. All right. All right. Another mountain off the top of the library.
He's probably going to hold on to that Pollen Bright Druid, potentially.
Nope.
Nope, never mind.
Here it
Okay.
comes. Does this actually line up? Does this actually open up a good attack, though, for Olivier? That's the question.
So if he puts a counter on the Crunch Wrangler,
Well, he could get two.
so he
Yeah.
he can either proliferate or put a +++ counter.
Right, I
It
guess
would
it
do the
doesn't
exact
matter.
same thing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter in this case, does it?
Okay, so
He put it on the Raging Crunch.
right.
Boy, I got to tell you, that Toll of the Invasion did serious work for
Oh,
Yuuya here.
absolutely.
Remember taking away Nissa a few turns ago? Has completely changed the outlook of this game and really allowed Yuuya to play for a late game that he can actually win, where he may not have been able to if Nissa was allowed to stay allowed to hit the battlefield.
I wonder if he's just going to fire off the Rouse Outburst and just force the combat trick out of Olivier because they're just trading 1-for-1, but at the same time Yuuya still just now has the ability to look at the top two cards and find one of his his end game cards.
That's right. And, this isn't the worst case scenario for Yuuya either, which, by the way, he did decide to do that because he still gets the card out of it anyway.
Right.
So he's just looking for expensive late game spells now. And let's not forget that he's got that Spellkeeper Weird as well that he can use to recycle Rouse Outburst.
Ooh, that's a lot of mana being tapped. Oh,
Uh-oh,
is it Niv Mizzet?
uh-oh.
There it is!
Niv Mizzet hits the battlefield. He's had the mana since turn 4.
Here we
Took him
go.
a few turns to find it. Let's see if he hits anything. So this is for each color pair. If there's a card that is that
There's
color
one.
pair, he gets it.
Just one.
Just one. So
I like how we're all kind of disappointed that he hit just one, but keep in mind, this was a 5-mana 6/6 that found him a Leyline Prowler
with flying.
with flying. So,
Yeah.
you don't need to necessarily draw 5 cards with this to actually have it be incredibly powerful. So, yeah.
Boy, I tell you what, Yuuya knows how to do it. There was a Crunch Wrangler revealed there.
Olivier running pretty hot with these.
He's 3 for 3.
He's 3 for 3 on this.
Yeah.
And yeah, Yuuya should be able to lock this game up.
Is this
fairly
thing over?
quickly. I mean, more or less, right? Like, he's got the 6/6 flyer. He's got a card draw, card advantage engine in the Soul Diviner on top of that, and he found that Leyline Prowler. Oh, double Leyline Prowler.
Wow, double trouble here for Yuuya. And Leyline Prowler so good against Olivier, as it just brick walls these green and red creatures that are trying to get through on the ground and makes it almost impossible for Ruel to really get through in a meaningful way. And of course, the fact that he's taking 6 damage in the air per turn, at least thus far, is really going to make it, well, impossible is probably a little strong, but nearly impossible for Olivier to get back into this. And of course, this is one of the downsides to the strategy that he's taken, is you really want to curve these Cron Stranglers into the 4-mana creatures. Instead, he's drawing them later, and they're just 2/1s that aren't doing anything on the battlefield right now.
Right, and Yuuya not even using the Soul Diviner on the token, just keeping it back as a 2/2 instead of drawing cards.
That's sacrilegious, right? Like, he should be reprimanded
6/6
for
flyer
this.
not big enough.
Right.
Let's make a 7/7. But Merfolk Skydiver, of course, has the ability where you can pay 5 mana to proliferate, so you can make it even bigger.
Yeah, but the 7, of course, is actually relevant here. Olivier says, I'm going to play, well, as it stands, Primordial Worm and attack with everything. And Yuuya goes, whoa, oh, okay.
It kind of looked like a Craterhoof Behemoth there, just like, hey, I have this giant thing that is going to pump on my team. But
overruns in this set? What happened here? So that is Yuuya Watanabe winning game number 2. But I will remind you, and also goes back to our discussion about pace of play, making sure that players play at a brisk pace. They got a game 3 upcoming.
Yes,
as well.
Definitely.
So we can take a look at Seth Manfield versus Jeff Cunningham. Now, we had popped in there for a minute. Seth Manfield needs much less of an introduction than Jeff does at this point.
Right.
Seth having really just sort of crushed the highest levels of Magic for five-ish years.
5-ish years.
Yeah, in a row. He has really just been near or at the top of the game for that long. And but Jeff Cunningham is definitely giving him all he can handle.
But it looks like he's got a pretty commanding board presence here. Jeff Cunningham with only an Erratic Visionary in play. Meanwhile, Seth Manfield with Arlen. It's a 5/5 Wolf token and has the ability to generate 2 more Wolves here, I believe. So must have played a Proliferate card. As you can see actually on the top, there's a Pollenbright Druid that put not only a +1/+1 counter on the Wolf, but also an additional loyalty counter on the Planeswalkers.
No, you're totally right, Paul. That is -2 to make a 3/3, so technically a 2/2, but gets a counter. Spellkeeper weird here for Cunningham. Cunningham's from British Columbia, just north of where you and I live, Paul. Couple hours on the freeway, and you too can be in beautiful British Columbia. It really is. They have that on their license plates, but it's true. It's
it's
absolutely gorgeous.
Great.
Yeah.
And Seth can continue to pump out Wolf tokens here with Arlen. Voice of the Pack. Of course, the static ability gives any wolves that enter the battlefield an additional +1/+1 counter. And Seth killing the Spellkeeper Weird with Band Together before Jeff Cunningham has the option of returning a spell from his graveyard, probably looking at potentially that Tyrant's Scorn. Sorry, Bolus's Scorn.
No, Tyrant's Scorn.
Tyrant's Scorn.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure it was named that at some point.
Yeah, yeah. it might have been.
Guarantee.
Okay, that's mistake number 1 behind the R&D curtain.
I'm just glad you called it Mana Geode earlier today.
Oh, yeah. No, not the scrying Manalith.
Yes.
And it looks like a Rubble Belt Rioters from Seth Manfield, which is going to be able to attack for a lot, as when it attacks, it gets +X+0 equal to the creature with the highest power.
Which in this case is 5?
It's a 5/5, so it's a 3-mana 5/4 haste creature.
Oof.
It's a lot of damage. Jeff Cunningham does have a Mobilized District, which he's going to use to try to maybe trade off with one of the, maybe the 3/3 creature here. 3/3 wolf token.
I'm looking to see that card in standard, by the way.
Mobilized District?
Yeah, the creature land that you see on the battlefield. Oh, yeah. Those creature lands always overperform.
Absolutely.
Constructed.
Absolutely.
Every time I see them. I remember when I first was starting to get into Constructed, Treetop Village was around. And
right.
These were cards that, we kind of just took for granted. But then every time I've seen them printed since, they've had a major impact on the formats that they're in, even if they only make colorless mana.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it actually pans out, because oftentimes these colorless lands are lands that make it into kind of colorless or monocolored aggressive strategies. But many of the monocolored aggressive strategies in current standard utilize those, triple casted cards like the Banalish Marshal and Goblin Chainwhirler. So
it's a tough sell.
There is this tension there. So like how many is actually correct. So that should be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
All right, let's take a look back at Yuuya Watanabe and Olivier Ruel as this one sort of winds down. I feel like Seth is in a good spot there. And we will, again, I will give you an update on that one once it is finito. But here, let's move back to our front table. And this is going to be the exciting Game 3 conclusion between these two players. Now, they should have enough time to finish the deal here, but it take a little while.
Will the crunches be wrangled?
Well, the Wranglers here, it's just the crunch that's missing, at least currently.
Yeah, and Yuuya did see a Paradise Druid in hand, but he doesn't have a ton of green sources to be able to play it on turn 2.
So it may just be a Gateway Plaza here on 2 instead?
Yeah, that would also be a thing. Yeah, he's only got 5 forests in his deck.
Yeah, he's just going to play the Gateway Plaza. Of course, you have to tap a land.
So Olivier really wants a 3-mana. Oh, there it is!
It is! Wrangler into Raging, and boom, hit you for 3. That's 7 power on the battlefield, and really does say you need to start doing some stuff immediately.
This is a lot of pressure. Yuuya really needs to find a way to kind of stymie this offense. Does he have something like a Leyline Prowler or maybe even a removal spell? And he does. Does have this Leyline Prowler that he can use to potentially trade. Wow, Olivier is slamming something.
I think it was a Turret Ogre.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is. It's a Turret Ogre. Does he just have to bite the bullet and trade off here?
For sure. And the thing is, Yuuya could potentially play something like a Niv Mizzet next turn, right?
Oh, you're right.
So you want to just be like, hey, I'll trade with this if you want. I mean, Leyline Prowler is fantastic in this matchup, and this is putting a lot of pressure on Yuuya. Also, Olivier doesn't want Yuuya to get to 5 mana for Enter the God Eternals as well.
That's right. 8 damage slamming into the red zone here and saying, Yuuya, boy, buddy, if you don't trade this thing off, you are really playing with fire. And so he's going to do so. He's actually going to take quite a bit of damage here as well.
He's going to take 3, I believe. He's going to take 1 Trample from the Crunch Wrangler and 4 from the Raging Crunch, and then, of course, gain 2 from the Leyline Prowler.
That's right. So down to 12 for Yuuya Watanabe. He finds another Leyline Prowler off the top of the library,
Big
though,
draw.
Paul. And these are going to be very difficult to get through if you're Olivier Ruel. But he's actually going to take his time here and make sure that once again Nissa can't hit the battlefield. Toll of the Invasion.
Oh, what a turn.
So
Spark
brutal.
Harvest.
Off of the token.
Off the token, killing the Turret Ogre. Now Olivier can't even attack with the Crunch.
Oh, my goodness. What a sequence for Yuuya Watanabe.
Devastating.
Beautifully planned out. Everything looks so good for Olivier Ruel. He was going to once again curve his way 2, 3, 4, 5 into Nissa, and instead he's got nothing. He can't even attack with that crunch.
Look at
his face. He's like, this looks so beautiful.
He's like, good beats, good beats.
Good beats.
He had the best possible start probably for his deck,
Yes,
right?
yes, it has to.
To top it off with the with the Nissa, but now
It's going to be a bully.
right.
Now that will allow him to attack probably for the next couple of turns, given the fact that the Iron Bully has Menace and will be difficult to get off the table, and the crunch is just big. Wow. Yuuya Watanabe, everybody. You show me that opening hand from Ruel, and I'm just going, and he's on the play. I'm just like, how is, right? Like,
Yeah.
that hand has a very high win percentage, and it just completely fell apart last turn thanks to Yuuya's Really great sequencing there. Awesome.
Yeah, but we also know that Yuuya's deck is extremely powerful. Sure, it might stumble a little bit at times because, of course, you are playing 5 colors. But his, if you just look at the mana, I mean, his mana does work. It just takes a little bit of time to kind of come out the gates. Leyline Prowler is fantastic against the red-green deck. He wasn't able to utilize it for mana, but just being able to trade and gain life, buying him the time to kind of, build out his lands and play the powerful cards in his deck. Just kind of allowing him to kind of stay alive here.
He can play Paradise Druid plus Soul Diviner here, which looks tempting. His other option is just to run out the Leyline Prowler. But, using up 4 mana and getting 2 creatures on the battlefield has to be tempting here for Watanabe.
Yep, looks like that's what he's going to do. And, he is at 12 life. He might just go for the double block on the Iron Bully if it attacks and just kind of hope that Olivier doesn't have a combat trick, because he does know about the Vivian's Grizzly in Olivier's hand. So
Olivier currently has 1 unknown card to Yuuya.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that if that's the case, you just have to risk it if you're Yuuya. And he can trade off and get this done. Now, this is kind of interesting as well, though, because he does have Niv Mizzet in his hand. Now, with 2 swamps on the battlefield, he wasn't going to be casting it next turn, even with the help of the Paradise Druid. But still, that's a step backwards as far as that goes. Now, the Prowler puts him, again, 1 mana source away of any color here to getting Niv Mizzet on the battlefield. Though, the truth of the matter is, I think if you're in Yuuya's seat, as long as you can cast it at some point, you feel fine, right? This
definitely
isn't the type of thing where he needs it this turn or the game ends or something weird like that.
Yeah, for sure. And, the Prowler is just going to do a great job of just playing defense here, because Olivier, I mean, if he wants to attack with the Raging Crunch, he needs to attack with the Vivian's Grizzly, which is just a 2/3. So Yuuya can comfortably just eat the Grizzly and only take a total of 2 damage.
Honor the God Pharaoh here for Olivier Ruel. So he's going to have to discard a card to this.
He discards a real spell, Chandra's Pyrohelix there.
Whoa. And draws 2 cards. He also gets an Amass for 1. Now, in his deck, he doesn't really have much Amass going on. This might be the only card that has it. So it's just the 1/1. But still it counts. What did Yuuya Watanabe find?
He drew a Dovin's Veto, which is pretty interesting. What is this?
Tidebearer Giant here for Yuuya. So again, really leveraging just the big mana, getting the big 4/5 blocker on the battlefield, and he's willing to pay a life to draw a card here for sure. Though his life total is still precarious. He's at 7, so he's got to be a little careful.
Olivier might be able to steal this, but if he does, it does need to be fairly soon, as there is that inevitability in Yuuya Watanabe's hand with that Niv Mizzet. I believe Yuuya actually boarded out the Dovin's Veto for Game 2 and brought it back in for Game 3, maybe just telling himself, you know what, I really don't want to play around all these combat tricks. And he also saw Nissa in that second game.
Really interesting in hand here for Olivier Ruel is one of his 2 copies of Bolt Bend. And this is a type of card that if your opponent is playing something, super splashy on the removal end, which Yuuya is.
Yep.
Can absolutely destroy a board state. But I will say, given what you just mentioned, it's pretty good to have Dovin's Veto when your opponent's trying to cast Bolt Bends.
Definitely. And Yuuya has now found another way to draw cards.
He's got the Soul Diviner plus the token.
Plus the token. He's got the Eternal Skylord in play. That's created a 2/2 token with the Soul Diviner. As we know, Yuuya now just needs...
He didn't do it. Oh, look at this. He just found Enter the God Eternals. Now, does he have the mana to leave up Dovin's Veto if he casts it?
He doesn't. He doesn't. Is he going to run into this Bolt Bend? I think he is. But so that will redirect the damage, but I believe Yuuya will still get
Now hold on
token,
a second.
Right?
Enter the God Eternal says, does 4 damage to target creature and you gain life. Target player puts up to 4 cards. Now, it does say single target for Bolt Bend.
Oh.
Does Enter the God Eternals have 2 targets if it's targeting a player and a creature? Of course it does, right?
Right. It just targets a bunch of different things. So you can redirect the 4 damage, I believe, right?
Well, it says change the target of target spell or ability with a single target.
Oh, with a single target.
Yeah, so I think it's just ineligible for Bolt Bend.
I see.
And yeah, that does seem to be the case because Yuuya just cast Enter the God Eternals and cleaned up that Vivian's Grizzly. Oh, that is so disappointing for Olivier because this, of course, would have been a huge swing back in the other direction. Look at him read it.
look, yeah, I mean, even the best players, they're all making sure it's like, okay.
Look at it. He can't even believe what's on that card and how brutal it is. I guarantee. So it looks like Yuuya is going to be able to win this game. Going forward here, that Olivier is going to show him that bullpen and say, I can't believe I couldn't have cast this.
Blue, green, black. Oh, so Yuuya can he cast Niv Mizzet now? He can, right? He now has the mana for Niv Mizzet here, but it looks like he's going to wait until he can play Niv Mizzet with Dovin's Veto backup potentially. And Yuuya is also now getting in with a 6/6 flyer with the Eternal Skylord on the battlefield. That 6/6 zombie token, army token, is flying. That's, of course, the bad sign when you are the aggressive deck. When your opponent starts attacking you, that means they're comfortable and have basically stabilized.
Yeah, and that is, of course, going to do it.
Still had all these.
The handshake, and yeah, Yuuya Watanabe with the big awesome cards in his hand left over, and he is going to take down this match 2-1 from Olivier Ruel. And this is a storyline that's been building since yesterday, and it has continued to. Yuuya is now 9-1 here on day number 2. Are we going to see him in another top 8? It is certainly possible, and somebody of his skill level with this record, boy, you know, maybe a little early, but you start thinking about it at this point, especially if he can get away with another win here and only have 1 loss going into Standard. He's in really good shape for a top 8.
And Olivier,
sorry, Modern. I didn't mean Standard.
And Olivier really kind of needs to try to get his head back into a good spot, right? Because he started today 8-0. He was the only undefeated player. And, you know, his deck didn't end up very strong. It wasn't very good. You know, you just really needed to curve out. And, I mean, you must be reeling from that last game because he had the perfect possible start for his deck, and he still lost, right?
Yes.
But, you know, Yuuya's deck is also exceptional. So, you know, just you have to get your mind in the right place. Try to salvage the draft, get that 9-2 because you're still going to be in a good position for a potential top 8 if you go into, of course, Modern at that 9-2 record.
Sometimes that mental stuff can really get to you, though. We saw Olivier step away from the table, a little bit earlier. But I will say he had a smile on his face, even when things weren't really going as well way down the stretch. And so I he's been here before. All right, looks like we've got live look in here. We're looking at Fernando Gonzalez.
What is happening here? He played Pollen Bright Druid, and then he's come on, okay.
What did you see?
So his opponent flashed in Pollen Bright Druid, and then was like, "Hey, I'm going to proliferate onto the Vivian." But like he was kind of doing everything quickly, and he wanted to block the zombie token. But his opponent is now saying that, "Hey, look, you put your creature in front of my zombie token, and then move to put a counter on the Vivian, so it's already too late."
So you missed your trigger.
And you missed your trigger on the Pollen Bright Druid.
This is João Andrade on the left there from Portugal, playing against Fernando David Gonzalez from Argentina. And as you can see right now, Andrade is consulting with the judge and saying, now come on, I want to do all of it.
Because when Pollen Bright Druid enters the battlefield, you have to choose one of the two things. You can either put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or proliferate. And I do not know if Andrade verbally said proliferate, but his plan here, as you saw, he does have a Giant Growth in hand, was to flash into Pollen Bright Druid and proliferate, and then block the zombie token, and then Giant Growth of Pollen Bright Druid to get rid of the zombie token.
But this is, of course, very important because if this is his plan, in order to keep Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, on the battlefield, he does need her to be at 2 loyalty rather than 1, it looks like.
Yes.
Unless that Flux Channeler is also attacking Vivian, which is unclear to me. I believe that it's not.
Yeah,
if it is, then Vivian's going away anyway. So what's the big deal?
Right. I'm trying to figure out, like, obviously we're doing a look in here. I'm trying to figure out how it's tapped.
Right. Because sometimes people will kind of tap 2 creatures near each other for a Planeswalker and then 1 out in the middle. The main reason that I think this is the case is just simply because why would that loyalty matter?
Right.
If all of the creatures are attacking Vivian. So we'll let this play out. It looks like the judges are consulting and figuring out what's going to happen here. That is a judge hand there explaining. We are playing at a very high rules enforcement level here at the Mythic Championship level. You have to remember, the players have worked very, very hard simply to get to this stage and play here, let alone the amount of money that they're playing for as well. So it does require a level of precision that is kind of above and beyond what you would see even, at your local game store or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. For a lot of players, if it is your first Mythic Championship, you really, do need to spend a little bit of extra time just making sure, all your game actions are crisp, and you just, make sure you signal everything that you do.
Right.
It's like, hey, I'm going to play this creature, enters the battlefield. I'm going to resolve this trigger. I'm going to do this. Just try not to do too many shortcuts, basically.
That's right. All right, we're going to take a short commercial break while this judge call finishes up. We'll be back right after this.
We are at the threshold of a new age.
Did you think death would free you from your obligation?
When the system fails, we will balance the scales. This is cruel territory now!
Get ready for the freak show!
What is there to fear? This is what we've been preparing for! The end race is upon us!
Your skull will make a fine.
When you live on a plane as dangerous as Ixalan, being tough matters. That's why Huatli, the Sun's Heart, really cares about a creature's toughness and rewards you for playing creatures with strong defenses. If we want to build around this uncommon planeswalker, we're going to need some high toughness creatures. And when it comes to creatures, white and green offer the best creatures with the toughest hides. Teo's Light Shield, Ironclaw Corvid, and Law Rune Enforcer are your primary payoffs in white. Note that while Teo's Light Shield does not have Defender, the 0/3 walls that Teo creates do, making him an unlikely pairing. Sorry, Teo. Green, on the other hand, has access to Arboreal Grazer, Snare Spinner, and Centaur Nurturer. Thundering Ceratok is a good way to get your creatures over opposing chump blockers, and Steady Aim becomes a slightly bigger giant growth when Huatli is in play. And don't forget Huatli's Raptor, which not only benefits from Huatli, but also proliferates her on the way in. There's one important sorcery worth mentioning. Since Huatli already asks for creatures with higher toughness than power, it's a slam dunk inclusion. Stay tuned to Mythic Championship London for more War of the Spark quick tips.
And welcome back. We are underway again here on our side table. The resolution of this was that in the end, the counter did go on to Vivian, and the block did happen as well as a giant growth here. So again, we mentioned beforehand that at this rules enforcement level, you do want to be crisp with your plays and make sure that you're playing cleanly, but also, this is a scenario where it looks like there's not a lot of wiggle room here, right? As far as anything else that could really have happened, and it does seem pretty clear what Joel was trying to do here, and he was able to do so. So what's happened now, just by the way to recap, is that the Pollen Bright Druid has blocked the army token and is now going to be the recipient of what looks like a giant growth. that would allow it to eat it. And critically, Vivian picked up an additional +1/+1 counter thanks to the proliferate there from that Pollen Bright Druid. And that means, yeah, there we go, that she will survive,
Right.
especially given that the Flux Channeler did not attack Vivian this turn. So now we're back underway. Thank goodness. And this is game number 3 between these two players as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Vivian has the static ability. You may cast creature spells as though they had flash, which is extremely difficult to play against. Because what are you going to do if your opponent just has 5 mana up? You just have to assume that they have at least, a 4/4 or a 3/3 in their hand, and makes attacking into it very, very difficult.
Yes, and that is what's happening here. Is really no reason here for Joao to do anything. He's just going to pass the turn back because he has these options available to him. He's going to play Cyclops Electromancer, though I guess the 1 damage can't kill anything. No, everything has at least 2.
Yeah, but just wants to make sure he doesn't fall behind on the board here and just put an extra creature on the battlefield. But the Ashiok Skulker is actually a very good card here because this will allow Fernando to give it, make the Skulker unblockable and finish off that Vivian.
Yeah, some type of creature interaction here, and there it
Ooh,
is. Band
big
together
card.
for Joa is fantastic.
That is huge, and now there's going to be another activation from Vivian, and Joao can get further and further ahead on cards here. Nissa's minus ability allowing you to, that was a big one.
Yeah, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Exile one of them face down and put the rest on the bottom in any order. And for as long as the card remains exiled, you can look at it and you can cast it.
I like
it's
that
a creature card.
An instant speed Primordial Worm.
Wow.
This Nissa has now gotten Andrade 3 cards with
Jeez.
Vivian's ability.
And you can see why that sequence in combat was so important earlier,
Right.
because that was the difference between Nissa surviving and not.
Absolutely.
Now the Lazotep Reaver's just going to jump in front. And they, by the way, Paul, we should note here, that is time in the round for these players. So we are now in extra turns here in Game 3 with players sitting at 19 and 18 respectively. We may have a very difficult time actually finishing off. And this could be, kind of surprisingly, Fernando, this would be his second draw if they don't finish in these extra turns.
Absolutely.
And these are bad for him, right? Like, make no mistake, draw's only worth 1 point.
Absolutely. I think the first draw is okay, but the second one is very bad.
Like, more akin to a loss.
Right, closer to a loss, definitely.
Right.
I assume these turns also include, of course, there was probably a brief time extension that these players received because of the ruling.
Yeah.
But, despite the cards that Andrade has kind of gone ahead on, he is a bit flooded, and Gonzalez does have a ton of cards still available in his hand. It's actually still not super clear who would come out on top in this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Fernando also may be playing for the draw at this point. The blue-black deck, really difficult to pile on 19 damage in just a couple of turns. And it looks like he's got Joao is actually going to cash in Vivian there.
Yeah, he's playing for the win now because we are in turns. Normally, you would, of course, try to accrue more and more advantage with that Vivian. But now, the clock is ticking. He wants to try to win this game, so he needs to just minus and get more action going. Just a Spark Reaver from Gonzalez. So
yeah, that's not it. He's playing for the draw for sure.
Yeah.
Which
this is turn 4.
Yeah.
This is turn 4, and Gonzalez is at 18.
Yeah, this
and
is
you can
not
see
happening.
the frustration in Andrade as he, I bet he feels like he would have won this game if it went on a few more turns.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating for him to pick up a draw here, but the truth of the matter is it's much worse for Fernando David Gonzalez. It's going to be his second draw. I mean, he is maintaining that undefeated moniker, but it's not really undefeated because the 2 draws are actually pretty painful for him. Now, that doesn't mean, he's still in great shape, right?
Of course, a draw is better than a loss,
right?
But at 8-0-2, somebody with a 9-1 record is actually in a better position than Gonzalez if he gets a draw this round.
And it does seem to be the case because we're in turn 5, and there's just really no way for him to get 19 damage through. So the players are going to have to shake hands and move on to the last round of Booster Draft with another draw on their record if you're in Fernando's seat, or on Darius, it's his first draw. He just, he looks frustrated. You saw a little emotion there. He signed the match slip and just kind of tossed it over. And that can be frustrating for sure because, again, he understands the way that we have these tournaments structured is a win is worth 3 match points, a loss is worth 0, and a draw is worth 1.
Yeah.
And, 1 is a lot closer to 0 than it is to 3 on that spectrum, and these things can add up. Now, in the right scenario, a draw can be a beneficial thing for you if you're, trying in the top 8, for example. But here early, you really want to get those wins, and sometimes it can be better to play it out. All right, well, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we've got one more round of Booster Draft for you right after this.